I have been the manager of a historic, haunted hotel for about 2 years now, and have been working here for about 4. And let's just say I've seen some shit. Shit I cannot explain, shit I can't even begin to fathom. Before I get into that though, there is some necessary background. The hotel I work at is sometimes infamous. You may have seen it in some YouTube videos or certain video games, but for the sake of not wanting to be fired, I will not name it. The hotel is family owned and managed with the exception of me. Other than the repairman who only comes in when something is broken, I am the only non-family member who works at this hotel. Of course, for any advertising, my name is left out, and it's considered strictly family run. The building has seen a fair number of deaths over its span, some being natural and peaceful, and others not so much. There is even a rumor the original owner threw himself out a window during the stock market crash and fell to his death. Anyway, I was hired 4 years ago as a favor to my parents, mostly working the front counter and helping clean linens. Then, 2 years ago, the aging owners made me a manager to help out at times when their kids cannot help, or if the family needs to leave town. Since I started here, I've seen and heard some weird shit. If I'm being honest, I'm not sure how we stay in business or how they can afford to pay me. We rarely get customers. Right now we have 2, and our only busy time is one weekend in September. Now, like I said, the place is family owned and operated with the exception of yours truly. The owners have a grandson who often hangs around the hotel a lot. As weird as it may sound, he is probably the family member I am actually the closest with, since he is the only one who isn't technically my boss, at least not for a few more years. When I first started, one of my jobs was to watch him and keep him out of trouble if the family needed to leave. Once during my first few months, I was watching him while the owners were out shopping. I'll admit, I'm kind of a shitty babysitter. I told him we would play hide and seek. I told him to hide and I would find him. But of course, I pulled the old trick where I send him off to hide and don't look for him. I sat at the desk looking at Instagram for maybe 10 minutes when I heard him screaming. I ran as quick as I could towards the screaming and ran into him as he came running down the hall of the second floor. He was crying as he ran into me and grabbed onto me tight. It took a few minutes to get him to calm down before I could get him to explain what had happened. He said he was hiding inside one of the housekeeping closets when he started to hear scratching all over the closet. He became too scared to move and sat there crying until the scratching finally stopped. At the time, I was new and naive, so I told him it was just his imagination. But man, if I knew the things I know now, I would have been scared shitless. So, of course the hotel has a basement. It's damp, poorly lit, and creepy at the same time though. It's just a basement. However, the hotel also has a sub-basement. There is a barred metal gate blocking off the stairs that lead down to it. Even with my best flashlight, I can't see all the way down. I swear I hear noises down there. Sounds of flowing water, scraping noises, and one time, I swear I heard the voice of a child. I've asked the owners about it several times and they dismiss it as me just hearing things, and maybe I am. Sometimes, even at a slow hotel, things can get stressful, but at the same time, the owners refuse to let me or anyone else in the sub-basement. It is one of only 3 rooms I don't have access or keys to in the hotel. I was working one evening in the winter about to leave for the night when a man walked in. There was really nothing odd about him at all. He seemed normal in every way. He asked if he could get a room for the night because he didn't feel safe driving back home in the snow. I got his card information, made him sign the standard papers we have, and gave him a room. I looked outside and noticed it was snowing pretty hard, so I decided I would just take a key to one of the rooms and stay the night instead of driving. One of the perks of my job. I wake up in the next morning and look out the window, The room I got just happened to be facing our parking lot, which is located in the back. When I looked out of the window, I noticed my car in the parking lot, but no other car, and no other cars. Snow covered everything in the lot, and there weren't even the tracks of another car in the lot. I got that weird feeling in my gut and went to check on my guest from last night. When I walked up to the door, it was wide open and looked untouched. I couldn't find the guest anywhere, and when I got to the front desk, not only was the key still hanging on the hook, but I couldn't find his paperwork either. We have a very old setup, so there are no cameras or anything that I could check, but despite knowing I checked this man in and gave him a key, I could find no proof he existed. Hi Reddit. My first post did pretty good, and I debated making a second one with some more of my stories. I almost didn't, but then some more weird things started happening, and I knew I needed a part 2, if not just to keep help me sane. If you haven't read the first post, here it is. The link will be in the description box below. So first things first, I should probably address the other 2 rooms I don't have the keys to. The first one is pretty normal. It is just a suite the owners use sometimes. I don't have keys, but I've had dinner with them there before. It seems like a normal room, lots of family photos and stuff like that. Room 501, however, well, that is different. Our hotel has 3 floors of rooms, but technically it has 5 floors. The 4th floor is a ballroom that we also sometimes set up as a dining room. The 5th floor is currently storage, but in the late 70s, or maybe the early 80s, there was an idea to turn the 5th floor into big suite rooms. 2 of them got built, but then they decided to give up on the idea. Suites 501 and 502. 502 is completely normal. We store anything more valuable in there. 501, on the other hand, has always been locked since I arrived here. Even the owners claim they no longer have the key. When I asked them about 501, they avoided the question. However, their grandson told me the story one day. Sometime before he was born, his grandpa's brother had to come visit at the hotel, and they offered him the finished suite on the top floor to stay in during the visit. The next morning, when they went to check in on his brother, they found him dead in the room of apparent suicide, gunshot to the head. Since then, the room has always been locked. Last year, the ballroom was rented out for a wedding reception. I was actually off that day, but I was a guest at the wedding. I knew the bride from high school. As we were toasting the bride and groom, the sound of a gunshot rang through the ballroom. It sounded like it had come from above us, and despite being off, I ran upstairs to the attic where the sound came from. But after a search, I couldn't find anyone or anything up there. I've always wondered if it was somehow connected to 501, but no matter how hard I try, I cannot find any proof of a suicide during that time period in the hotel. Earlier this week, I spent some time in the basement doing some odd jobs for the owners. Since I wrote about the sub-basement last time, I ventured over to the gate that led down to it. I shined my flashlight through like I had done before several times. I still saw nothing, so I stopped and I listened. I wish I could say I heard the tortured souls of the damned or the ghost of a dead president, but none of that happened. Instead, I heard the sounds I've heard before, the sound of water, the sound of scraping. I'm so curious about what is down there. I need to find a way in or at least see what is down there. We had the repairman in yesterday, and I almost asked him if he knew anything about it, but the owners were with us the whole time, so I never got the chance. I am considering learning how to pick a lock if it's even possible for this type of lock. I just feel a real urge to know what is down there. Now, our hotel has no cameras on the inside, and until yesterday we didn't have any outside either. About a week ago, we started getting some reports of a woman standing in our parking lot really late at night. We considered them to be a prank at first, until we kept getting calls about it from other locals. So we had the repairman bring us a camera. The owners only wanted one facing the parking lot, and they insist it is only temporary. The thing is cheap. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a $25 one on Amazon, but it works, and it has a somewhat decent night vision. Anyway, he installed it last night and we set it up to record overnight. When I came in this morning, we reviewed the footage from last night and found something creepy as hell. Around 2 a.m., the camera cuts out for about 30 seconds, and when it turns back on, there is a woman just standing in our empty parking lot. She is skinny and looked almost like she was on drugs. Her face wasn't completely visible, but it seemed long and thin. She stood in the parking lot for 30 minutes just staring at seemingly nothing. At a few points, it looked like she was talking to something, but the camera showed no one else anywhere in the lot. Then the camera cut out again and she was gone. No one else seemed fazed by the timing of the cuts in the video, but I am a little on edge from it. Naturally, I was asked to stay the night tonight and keep a watch on the cameras. If anything happens, I am supposed to call the cops. I'm not really thrilled to be spending the next few hours watching these cameras, or possibly dealing with a crazy junkie, but I am being paid extra. It's only worth noting we have no guests right now, so I'm alone in this building. Honestly, it's giving me the creeps. There are so many creaks in the building, and sometimes it sounds like there are footsteps on the floors above me, but I'm telling myself I'm just hearing things. It isn't helping much though. I will try to update as soon as I can if anything happens tonight, but God, I am really hoping nothing happens. I don't even know where to begin. When I posted part 2, it was already the morning after my first overnight shift. Yes, that's right, first. I tried to post it earlier, but this subreddit and its paragraph rule made it so it didn't post. But now it's been a few days and something is seriously fucked up about this place. Anyway, the night I did the first overnight shift was alright. I heard noises that freaked me out a few times, but whenever I'd go and check, I'd find nothing. Around 2:30 a.m., the woman appeared on the camera again. She seemed to be wearing the same thing as the night before, but really that could just be the look of the camera at night. I called the cops right away, but by the time they showed up, she was gone again. I filled out a report and they took a copy of the recordings from both nights. Once that was over with, I decided to spend the last few hours just walking around the hotel and checking things out. I mean, I've obviously been in all or almost all of the rooms by now, but I've never really taken the time to check them out. All of the rooms are pretty much the same with just a few differences based on when they were renovated, but I did notice something about the rooms on the second floor. When you enter, if you look at the top right corner of the door frame, each room is marked with a different shape, either a square, circle, or triangle. The color is always blue. I'm not sure what these are or why they're on the second floor only. I wonder how long they've been there. They're just in the right spot and the right size, you would almost never notice them. Anyway, the owners came in around 7 a.m. to relieve me. I gave them the full rundown of everything that had happened with that woman and calling the police. The owners asked me if I could stay the night again just one more night. They promised it would be the last night and they would take over any remaining night shifts. I agreed. I mean, I'm not really in the position to be turning down that kind of money. I stopped home, took a shower, and got some sleep. When I woke up, I packed up some things like my Nintendo Switch, just in case it was a boring night. Night 2 started out pretty good. When I arrived, the owners told me that we did have a guest that night. Some businessman who was on his way to New York had for some reason decided to stop in our small town and stay in our hotel. I was glad, honestly, there would be someone else there tonight, not just because it was good for the hotel, but because being alone in that massive building was a bit unnerving. The night started slow. I kicked back playing Switch and glancing at the camera occasionally. Nothing had ever happened until very late, so I figured I was fine to play my switch for a bit. Around 1 a.m., I switched off my switch and started to pay better attention to the camera. 1 a.m., nothing. 2 a.m., nothing. 3 a.m., nothing. 4, 5, and 6 a.m., nothing. As the sun started to rise around 6:30, I let out a sigh of relief. There had been nothing strange that whole night. Then the man staying at the hotel came down to check out. He told me he wanted to get on the road as soon as possible to try to make it to New York that day, about a 5 to 6 hour drive. He did have a question for me though, a question that chilled my bones. "Hey, what was with that lady crying last night in the parking lot?" he asked. I looked at him puzzled, and he explained to me that he had gotten up around 3 a.m. to go to the bathroom when he heard a noise outside his window. When he looked out, there was a woman in the parking lot who was loudly weeping. I apologized to him so many times he probably thought I was crazy, but he accepted my apology and left. I've tried rewatching the footage of that time so many times now, but the camera shows nothing in the parking lot. I felt like I was going crazy, but at least I didn't have to work another night. Right? Right? Night 3. I sat there waiting for the owners to come in and relieve me. It was almost 10 a.m. and they still hadn't arrived. Finally, I heard the door at the front of the hotel open, but instead of the owners was the grandson, Brady, not his real name. Brady told me his grandpa had a heart attack late last night. His whole family was across state lines at the nearest hospital. He told me he was going to work the day shift, and his grandma wanted me to stay overnight again so she could stay with her husband at the hospital. I really had no choice but to agree. Brady was about 12 or 13 when I first started here, so now he's got to be at least 16. Not to sound weird, but puberty was kind to him. He is now taller than me by quite a lot. He is pretty handsome and he is pretty muscular. Far different from the kid I used to trick into hiding without being looked for. Brady is a good guy, don't get me wrong, but until now he has never had to work a day in his life. So I spent a few hours showing him how to check people in and out, to deal with problem guests and things like that. I decided to just sleep in the hotel that night and grabbed myself the key to my favorite room and instantly fell asleep. I woke up to a pounding on my door. When I looked at my phone, it was already 9 p.m. Time to start my shift again. Brady was at the door waiting for me. He told me nothing much had happened during his shift, but he was going to stay the night at the hotel since he would probably be working the next morning as well. He sat in the lobby with me and we talked for a few hours before he finally went to the room to sleep. I sat in the lobby once again watching the cameras. When I saw the woman again, she stood in the parking lot staring straight into the camera this time. She was smiling this really creepy smile. I reached to call the cops again, but decided not to. I just knew she would disappear before they would respond. Instead, I grabbed a knife out of the kitchen and walked outside to the parking lot. She was still standing there. "Hey!" I screamed at her. Her body twisted and turned towards me in an unnatural way. She looked like the other mother from Coraline, but scarier. She let out a shriek and came running towards me. I held out the knife to try and stop her, but it didn't. In fact, she seemed unfazed by it as it stabbed her in her side. She didn't even blink. She was only a few feet away from me. She smelled like death, and I was crying uncontrollably. All of a sudden, the power went off on the whole street, and when it flickered back on, she was gone. But as I looked up at the windows of the hotel, I swear I saw her inside the building. I sat in the parking lot crying uncontrollably until Brady came running out sometime later. He helped me get back inside. We called the cops and they came again. I filled out another police report. They searched the whole building twice and found nothing, but when we went to give them the footage, we found the whole drive had been corrupted. I slept on the floor of the office in the lobby with Brady taking the rest of my shift. Feels weird being 21 and having to have a 16-year-old protect you. But it's better than being alone. Brady said I could take the day off, but I couldn't leave him alone at the hotel with everything going on in his life. So right now we are tag teaming the day. He's sleeping right now. We actually have about 5 guests that came in today, which is a lot for us. I'm just hoping the next few days are calm. Something is seriously wrong with this place.